I think that staking is the most proven and the most long-standing DeFi opportunity compared to others.
And it is also actually quite rare to hear the words insurance and crypto go together.
If you have the right governance and if you have clear signing, you're basically protected. And so it's like, yes, you can do all these different things that you could do in the crypto space, but you don't have to sacrifice security.
Institutions of different kinds, they sometimes say to me, I would like to stake, but I need to keep it in my custodian, at my custodian, so I cannot stake it, but actually you can because it still stays there.
I don't hear people talk about it, not because it's not important, it's because for them it's a bit of an afterthought.
I do vaguely feel like I heard the mention of an Easter egg from Seb on the future of enterprise, but I'll let our listeners come back to hear about that in the future. Hey everyone, I'm Ariel Wengroff. I lead global marketing and communications at Ledger. I'm so thrilled to be sitting here with two people who are leading innovation and building for the institutional industry for crypto and blockchain technology. So I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves, and I'll start with you, Seb.
So I'm Sebastien Badault. I run enterprise at Ledger, or B2B. B2B is an important part of Ledger, more and more, especially in this cycle, which is definitely led by institutions. And it's something that we've been building on for the past 5 years, trying to bring all the great things that we do on the consumer side to institutional players. And we have a lot in the pipeline in this year coming forward. And so we're really excited to be here. And I think that there's a common thread between the consumer side and the enterprise side is that we really pride ourselves on being a platform and making it available to as many partners and players as possible. So it's a great day for us to have Max here because he is a partner, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Thanks for having me. I'm Max Marcisiak. I'm the lead partnerships manager at Luga Nodes. And what Luga Nodes is, we are first and foremost an institutional grade, an enterprise grade staking validator. This is part of our broader initiative of being a blockchain infrastructure partner for institutions like layer one blockchains or institutional investors in the digital asset space. And staking is our core focus, and we're running secure infrastructure to enable staking for partners and investors in the digital asset space to gain some yield and make some yield on with their digital assets that are stakeable.
Fabulous. Well, thank you both for being here. I do vaguely feel like I heard the mention of an Easter egg from Seb on the future of enterprise, but I'll let our listeners come back to hear about that in the future. But Max, can you actually tell us a little bit of how Luga Nodes was founded and what eventually led you to become a partner with Ledger Enterprise?
Yeah, absolutely. So how it all started, it was approximately 3 years ago. And maybe some of the listeners noticed maybe from the name. So Luga Nodes, that's a word combination of Lugano and Nodes. And Lugano is a very beautiful city in Switzerland, but it's not only famous for being a very beautiful city, but they have a very interesting crypto initiative that I think deserves a little bit more attention. So it's called Plan B. The B stands actually for Bitcoin, blockchain. And the initiative of the city, actually, officially from the city in collaboration with Tether, is to accelerate blockchain and Bitcoin adoption on the city level, actually. So the initiatives include something like you can pay your taxes in Bitcoin. You can also, for example, they have 100 million Swiss francs investment fund to invest in blockchain startups. So we actually, as Luga Nodes, we started in Lugano from this initiative, and in the last 3 years we grew to a point where we stake approximately $4 billion US dollars with our clients in a non-custodial. Well, I think we will definitely dive deeper into the self-custody part later on. But this is where we started actually with the Lugano Plan B initiative. And we developed over the last 3 years. We grew over the last 3 years with many different assets, with many different partners to enable the secure and lucrative access to non-custodial yield opportunities.
Super exciting. And what was the moment where Luga Nodes and Ledger Enterprise sort of came together?
So we started approximately 1.5 years ago with the initiatives. Because I think the partner base of both companies is very common. And again, some of the focuses are secure access, right? Institutional access, and institutions, as Sebastien mentioned, they need a little different setup than maybe the retail users. And this is where we came together, and we as a partner specifically for staking also enable the clients of Ledger Enterprise, for example, to have this secure and institutional access to these opportunities beyond just, you could say, custody or holding, to, in this case, attract more, to gain some yield out of staking in a secure environment.
And I think there's like a common thread, like around the security piece, which I think made it like pretty evident for us to like work together, because I think that in the way that we approach the relationship with these partners, there's some similarities. So I think it really was very natural for us to like work together, and we're very happy to integrate them into the ecosystem.
Something that's always been great about how I felt Ledger Enterprise and Ledger overall have functioned is it's always about being stronger together in the industry. All tides rise together. And so I do think that that's an important piece here, because something that you highlighted, which I'm curious for you to kind of share, Seb, is most people who listen to this podcast will know what staking is, but there is a different approach for institutional staking. Things are changing now in terms of user friendliness and needs. So maybe you can actually explain sort of like Enterprise's approach and this partnership in that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's changing on the staking side is that it's not just about yield anymore. If you're an institutional player, in some ways you have to stake, because if you don't, whatever money you have, you're kind of be with inflation, etc. You're like losing out. So you have to stake. So if you're going to be staking, you want to make sure that operationally, in terms of like regulation and auditability, etc., you have like the best of breed, because you're going to have to show people. There's going to be more and more demand for being able to show that you're not putting your clients' assets in danger in any way, shape, or form. So I think that it's about, so that's the first piece. And then obviously you're going to want to make sure that like you're holding the keys. And that's why you're going to go to Ledger and be able to like do it with a partner that allows you to do that. That you create the right level of governance to know, who is doing what and who gets to validate what. And then the third piece is around scalability, because, if you're going to have a staking strategy, and I think more and more in treasury management, staking strategy is going to be more and more important. You want to have something that's very broad. And so you want a solution that allows you to be scalable. And I think that when you look at the partnership that we have in place, Ledger brings in, obviously the security layer, and then Luganodes can bring in, the validation and the capacity to be able to, tell the treasury management folks, we're doing it right. You're doing it the right way.
It is interesting, actually. I've been thinking about how we're sort of in this new version of the Gilded Age in terms of the way that financial systems are being adopted and what they're needed for. I mean, so much of the kind of financial sector and perilousness that existed in the late 1800s in the US, I think we're sort of mirroring, where there are a lot of systems that really are requiring these financial overhauls, but then billions are being leveraged, and businesses are really in the wild, wild west in terms of understanding the steps that they're taking and what they're recommending for their own clients at an institutional level. So bringing this type of partnership together is creating more of that sort of, I think, probably peace of mind that others otherwise might feel more hesitant to be participating in at such scale, particularly from like a large geopolitical perspective.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the thing that's changing also is that there's a difference in terms of who's coming into the market. And we started obviously with crypto natives, and for them, even though they obviously wanted to do it right, because to your point, when you're securing billions, and some of them are moving billions around, you obviously have a lot more pressure than if it's just like your bag and it's a few thousands. Right. But what we have to prep for is, the new institutions coming in, and these guys coming from TradFi, et cetera, they've had all the checks and balances in place for years, right? So they're coming into a space where they're expecting it to be there, right? So we have to, it actually raises the bar. And I think we're lucky enough to have put the bar very high from the start. But if you came to them with a solution that was, half baked, they'd be like, this is not good enough. So that's why, it makes sense to partner together and make sure that the bar is where the new entrants in the space are going to want it to be.
100%. And obviously, there is, of course, unavoidable risk that exists when these types of things occur. So, Max, I'm curious if you can actually explain what slashing penalties are and some of the things that you've put in place at Luga Nodes to make it so that sort of clients can be more mindful and avoid these types of challenges.
Absolutely. So maybe if we can quickly zoom out a little bit, the term staking, very important, also very staking has been adopting very well in the crypto space.
Yeah.
But also it has a lot of confusion because it's been synonymously used, what we also saw, for many things that could be done on DeFi. So I just also wanted to clarify when it comes to staking. It's different than, for example, lending, which has different types of risks and returns. It's different than, for example, providing liquidity on DEXs, for example, on trading pairs. So, and also to maybe zoom in a little bit, this original staking, on-chain staking, this is also, first of all, the validation process of proof of stake networks, and validators like Luganodes are actually what miners are to Bitcoin. So we produce the blocks in the blockchain. We make sure that the transactions are legit, that they are honest, that nobody, for example, make money out of thin air and just add their own transactions. So this is actually our role. And how do we keep the validators, the block producers, honest, right? And this is touching upon your question regarding slashing. So there are different protocols rules that define, hey, you as a block producer, you have to stay honest. If you don't stay honest, for example, as mentioned, you create money out of thin air. I just add my own transaction to it that I own $100, for example, which is not true. I get slashed, I get penalized, so to say. And this checks also keeps us, the validators, the block producers, honest and legit. And slashing risks is if the clients stake, for example, let's make a simple example. They have their money with Ledger Enterprise, and their digital assets with Ledger Enterprise. They stake with a partner like Luga Nodes, right? But now, or they stake with anyone, and the validator does not behave as to the protocol rules, then they can be slashed. They can, depends a little bit on the network. So there are different kind of blockchains, but they can lose some portion of their investment money. So it has to be it's very important that the partners are very well selected, that they adhere to the rules and how they can minimize or even eliminate, so to say, but minimize, I think is the right term, the risk of slashing, of losing money.
I think it's an important point because we talk a lot about the fact that secure governance means that you can give people the opportunity to set up the best process for themselves, but it doesn't solve against other actors if you don't want to set up the best process. So part of what you're also discussing, which is important, is choosing partners that have strong discernment, because it would be impossible for one business to be auditing everything at once for all of these elements that are changing. Are there sort of maybe like a mental checklist for someone who might be listening to this podcast that might be sort of the CISO or the CTO or the deciding person who might be coming to either of you to be thinking about some of these day-to-day questions they should be asking?
If I can chip in here, first of all, I think what I feel from Ledger Enterprise, that the users of Ledger Enterprise, they expect also Ledger Enterprise to pre-select right partners exactly for that reason, because security is the first and foremost mantra of Ledger Enterprise. So first of all, this, and when it comes to zooming into the staking part, how to minimize these risks, also to be a little bit more specific. For example, we always, for example, run a backup node. So if we are a validator and we have it in one region, we always run a backup node, because it can theoretically happen that the validator goes offline, data center goes offline, the powers goes off, and you need to act very quickly to switch it off to the different validator. So this is something that, for example, Luga Nodes does, that we always have a backup online in a different region that is independent of it, just in case if we have to switch it over. And second of all as well is on the institutional setup part. So we as Luga Nodes, we are an insured validator. What does it mean is that if theoretically the slashing happens, then the client would also be insured by us. For example, for Ethereum, which is a slashable chain. So we have these checks and balances in place in order to make the client comfortable. And the client, as Sebastien mentioned, these are institutions that coming in, these are new entrants. They have a different requirements that retail users, and they're looking for these type of solutions and setups to be better safe than sorry.
That is, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that on the better safe than sorry piece, and we've seen this in the past few months, that And I think that this is an interesting parallel between what's happening in the crypto space versus what's happening in the TradFi space, is that a lot of people in the crypto space have been trying to kind of cut corners when it comes to security, and it's come back to kind of be a pretty negative impact on their bottom line, their business. So I think that to your question, Ari, of what would a CISO or a CTO or the CFO rather think about, what's the checklist, making sure that you have the right security setup, I think, is the first one. And even and that's an interesting parallel between the CISO, who would probably err on the side of choosing the best solution, and the CFO, who is going to do treasury management but also wants to make sure that he gets the most bang for his buck. But at one point or another, making that investment and also putting it in front of other things that you pay for, like licenses, etc., for different software. At the end of the day, what you end up paying for security is not that much, and it's definitely worth every penny when you can sleep at night.
Yeah.
I mean, 100%.
Sleep is very important.
Sleep is very important, especially as we age, and brand trust is also impossible to win back. I mean,
that's right.
The price that you pay to make sure that you're not in that headline is quite key on that
That's right.
end. And it is also actually quite rare to hear the words insurance and crypto go together. So I think it is important to double click on what you mentioned, Max, about that component, because it is something that when you enter into the world of crypto, you still have no takebacks most of the time. So that it is a really essential and great thing that's offered there. I mean, something that you both sort of mentioned in that harboring around security is Luganodes and Ledger Enterprise are both non-custodial models. I think it would be great if each of you could actually speak to how that is sort of a benefit in the way that clients approach your offering today, sort of being able to stake and still maintain private keys.
I mean, I think that on the Ledger side, what's interesting is this idea that clearly delegation doesn't mean that you lose access. It means that you're trusting, but you always have the keys. And that's absolutely key, right? And I think that that's really what, going back to this idea of peace of mind, you have full peace of mind, because even though you're going to trust a partner to stake for you, at the end of the day, you are the one, you remain in control. Freedom from compromise. You don't have to compromise that control. You could equate it to this idea of, you give someone your vote, but you always hold on to the ballot, right? So I think that that's key for our partners, because if they chose to do self-custody, if they chose Ledger, which is, obviously I'm subjective, but is the right choice, that means that they don't have to compromise anything, and they will always, remain in power and have access to their keys.
Yeah, and I think it's worth to stress that out, right? That non-custodial is actually eliminating the counterparty risk, which we know from the previous world, and also from Finance 2.0. And that was one of the main reasons why also crypto was invented, you could say, with starting with Bitcoin, for example. Bitcoin, I'm sorry. And regarding the non-custodial part and staking, it's sometimes hard to wrap their head around it. But I just wanted to underline what Sebastien just said, that if you stake, for example, via Ledger Enterprise with Luganodes, you still, in the funds, the assets that you stake, still stay in the same place where they are at Ledger Enterprise. And you can control it by, if you would like to stop staking, right? Because you have other plans for the assets. You can do it. You don't have to ask the Luganodes, the validator, for permission. It's non-custodial, so you 100% control it. And I just wanted to highlight that, because it's sometimes hard to wrap around the head around the non-custodial part, but it's literally how it is.
And I'll make a little plug because I the fact that you're talking about counterparty risk, we launched an off exchange trading platform with that same kind of, called TradeLink, with that same kind of ethos, that same kind of idea of allowing asset managers to go and trade on exchanges with no counterparty risk, because it remains with the custodian. And I think so there's a real parallel here between the two, this idea of saying, hey, you can basically do what you would want to do, but you don't have to take any risk. You will always be protected, and there is no counterparty risk in what you're doing. And I think that's very, very big in the space that we work in.
Yeah. And while also it can save money, right? On the fee side of things. And again, this example with the exchanges, there were so many examples over the last years where there were big hacks. And I think the exchanges in general, they improve a lot, right? And they're very important and good ecosystem partners as well. But it happens from time to time. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bad players as well in the world.
They're big targets, right? They're the ones who have the most, most funds being traded, etc. So they're the biggest targets. Obviously, that's where people are going to go.
And having solutions like ThreadLink also on the trade side of things to minimize the risk, while also again, finally also saving also fees. It's a very nice and refreshing solution, and we much appreciate it as well in the crypto ecosystem space.
Yeah, I mean, the way that you're describing it to me right now, I would think that it's a no-brainer. To be honest, I mean, you're sort of solving one of the biggest cruxes that exists in the history of finance. I do think there's an interesting moment happening where so many businesses are choosing to SPAC or IPO, and there's sort of a mix of people making more choices thinking that that's actually giving business credibility. But from a hacking or secure governance standpoint, it does not reduce any risks. And it is important for some of these business leaders when they're making choices to understand that that doesn't change actually your analysis of how you should be choosing your partners and your providers. So I think that's an important moment in this transition. I am curious, something that is less sexy but critical is obviously reporting and auditing. It's something that Ledger Enterprise is quite familiar with. Can you speak to sort of how Enterprise approaches that process and something that sets us apart?
Yeah, I think the really important thing is to go back to, and maybe it's not sexy, but if your customer has an issue, has a problem, you're going to want to try to fix it, right? And I think that for the longest time, when you're doing treasury management or you're a financial player, or you're just like the CFO of a company, a lot of what you would do pretty much by hands, using Excel files, et cetera. And so you're trying to take all these different data points and bring them together. Every time, if you're doing it by hand, clearly there's potential mistakes that happen. And the idea was to really, when we build the solution, bake in this idea of audit, et cetera, within the solution from the get-go, right? So it's not like an afterthought. It's like, oh, and by the way, what are they going to want to do? Are they going to want to do a report? What if they get audited? No, it's part of the solution from the get-go. And so as a result, and I'll go back to what I was talking about on scalability earlier. If you're using multiple partners, right? If staking becomes really a big part, and more it's becoming a key part of treasury management for CFOs, et cetera, in these companies, you're going to want to have a place where you can, through an API, on demand, et cetera, have access to these reports in a very easy way. And so that was really baked into the Ledger Enterprise solution. And we know that, just like there's going to be more and more hacks, there's going to be more and more audits, right? And so being able to have access to something that's really simple is key in the day-to-day. It might be boring, but it's definitely something that's needed.
Yeah, 100%. Also, just with how global both of these businesses are that you have. I mean, being able to have that and then have AI also help for translation or some of these different tools that are necessary as we have more adoption.
And we might not forget that in the case of the staking features, right? This is something where income yield is generated. So that's also important for the financial auditing. Where is this yield coming from?
Of course.
And if we zoom in a little bit on the staking side of things, the reporting that Ledger Enterprises together in, for example, partnership with Luga Nodes provides to the end client is basically how much reward was generated, where was it generated, when exactly,
who signed, etc. Every transaction, everything is transparent, right? So
and this is absolutely needed because also, as Sebastien mentioned, the landscape is changing a little bit. It's especially this cycle is more institutional. We see it with the treasuries. They have just different requirements, accounting requirements, and a reliable, secure platform like Ledger Enterprise. They already thought about that. They already thought that reporting is needed, and that's why we didn't save a time to skip that. But we also built that also for the end clients, so they can already be audited and compliant with their accounting needs.
It's becoming like a selling point, right? In some ways.
Yeah. No, 100%. It reminds me of these types of conversations remind me of you try to think of every plot in a movie where the plot couldn't have happened if you had this type of tool.
Yep.
There are all of these ones where it's well, it just wouldn't have been possible. I think about that all the time, and you're both very much reinforcing it. If you were to think about something that you have a prediction on in the space that excites you for adoption? I would be curious for each of you, sort of what you think over the next year or so we're going to see.
I mean, my prediction, but it's more than a prediction because I think it's happening already, is just how more and more companies are going to, start creating treasuries around Bitcoin and around crypto. And I think it goes even beyond that because with the Genius Act, it's going to be corporates starting to like issue their own stable coins as well. And so all of that is important because if you are creating a treasury or if you're issuing a stable coin, you're going to want to stake, right? One way or another. So I think that I would say that the future is very bright for staking because I think it's going to become, I mean, it already is, and it's going to become more and more of a absolute key feature in everything that you're doing in treasury management. And I think that, it's going to be hockey stick in the next, 12 to 18 months.
I think that staking is the most proven and the most long-standing DeFi opportunity compared to others. There are billions staked assets, and again, if we take an example of this cycle's trend with the treasuries coming up on the Ethereum side of things, especially, they already also baked staking into their offering, and staking will only grow from here. Again, also because it's proven for many years. Most of the blockchains are proof of stake blockchain consensus types, and that's why. And everybody also, I think, is interested to see how they can earn additional yield in a very healthy manner with mitigated risks. So that's why I personally also think, and we personally think, that staking will also grow even more, also on the institutional side as well.
And you're in conversations with clients or potential clients all the time. You're at different events. What's like the biggest thing that you hear regularly where you're like, oh, I wish you just knew that wasn't true, or I wish you had more information about this thing? Is there something you'd love to just kind of dispel right now that you feel like you repeat a lot to folks?
I mean, I keep talking about. I think I said it earlier, but I think that there is still in a lot of people like a lack of not understanding. I think a lack of really putting a lot of thought into their security setup and thinking that whatever is good for them on the consumer side can, and this is really in the crypto space more than anything, but if it works for me on the consumer side, then it'll work for me on the institutional side, and it doesn't, and there's a reason why we've built these tools. So I think that if there's one thing that, and I'll tell you, like, the other thing is that your question was, it's something that I hear, etc. Actually, I don't, because I don't hear people talk about it. I don't hear people talk about it, not because it's not important, it's because for them it's a bit of an afterthought. And I think that I really feel that when you look at what's happening on the regulation side and with the inflows, etc., coming into the space, that we have this incredible opportunity, right? And the train left the station. Like the opportunity is here. When you see the JP Morgans and the Goldman Sachs and all these different, big players like moving towards crypto, that, and right now we've only seen like a little piece of the tide, right? It's only going to get larger. But in order to really take that wave, you need to do things right. And I think that, it was okay you were mentioning, the Wild West before. It was okay to be in the Wild West 5 years ago. It's not anymore. You gotta get it right. So that's the thing that's kind of missing in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, for the amount of governments or multi-billion-dollar businesses that are talking about getting into the space that actually are not using a non-custodial solution, it's a pretty terrifying underpinning.
Yeah. For me personally, given that we are mostly focusing on staking, right? The misconceptions that we see, and sometimes we laugh a little bit about it in the sense that, because we are in this rabbit hole called staking for ourselves, right? But many people are not, of course, and that's why it's our job to educate them, even if it's just on a very basic high level. This is very important, and I just want to stress out that again. Staking, for example, the classic original staking is non-custodial. Just wanted to repeat that the funds stay within the same source where they press the stake button, so to say. And many people would be surprised that a lot of clients that we talk to, institutions of different kinds, they sometimes say to me, I would like to stake, but I need to keep it in my custodian, at my custodian, so I cannot stake it. But actually you can, because it still stays there. Yeah. So sounds a little bit funny, but it's I never hesitate to explain it and repeat it more and more, even if it sounds very simple, to point that out on a non-custodial part on the staking side of things, just to make sure that also the client feel comfortable and understands what the non-custodial actually means, and that it also has no counterparty risk, for example.
Make it into a T-shirt, and wear it at conferences. Repetition does not spoil the prayer. I think it's important.
So true. I mean, I actually will say Americans are best at bumper stickers and T-shirts that you can look at in the airport.
Good idea.
This is a real thing. Also, like if you actually just said to somebody, did you know you could control your money? Like you could just like maintain control of your money or your business's money. Nobody else gets to make money off of your money. You can make money off of your money. It's like these very fundamental things that still feel so far away, which is,
But also because I think a lot of, for a long time, people have, just like, and I'll make it parallel, but like, just like you've outsourced kind of like your health to your doctor, you've outsourced your money to your banker. And now it's like, hey, how about we take the control back, right? Like my money and my health are really important to me and I want to own it. I don't want somebody else to own it instead of me, right?
100%. And also because of the way finance works today, it's not physical. It's not that type of exchange that used to exist before. It's usually some form of an app on some kind of a device that you're doing directly, and there's some intermediary, but it doesn't need to be what it was before. So I think that opportunity is absolutely prescient, and it's just kind of like changing that behavior shift. And once the shift is made, people won't be able to believe they went before.
Absolutely.
It's sort of, there's like a psychological understanding that a patient believes that they are more likely to be healed if the doctor gives them an answer that someone else could have also given them, in the same way that it's also more satisfying for the doctor. And so I think for some of these leaders of institutions, we have to kind of make things easy enough for them to feel that same relationship, right?
Yeah. And what I personally really like in case of Ledger Enterprise, for example, is that, yes, self-custody, take back control, but some may think, okay, what now, right? I have no idea. And I personally like that Ledger Enterprise also acts as a sort of curator, because there's a lot of also noise in the crypto space. There's a lot of experimentation, a lot of, unfortunately, scams still. And Ledger Enterprise is also acting for me as a curator to make sure that the user that is still in control of their funds, but is not exposed to scams, for example, right? So it's a very actually comfortable position to be fully in control in a self-custodial setup, but still have access to even further things like, for example, staking or trading via Treadling.
Yeah, and you have a lot of checks and balances, right? I mean, clear signing obviously being one of them, but the governance piece that we talked about before is also like a great way, right? Like if you have these two things, if you have the right governance and if you have clear signing, you're basically protected. And so it's like, yes, you can do all these different things that you could do in the crypto space, but you don't have to sacrifice security.
Well, I'll say I feel very reassured by the partnership between Ledger Enterprise and Luga Nodes. So thank you both, Seb and Max, for being on the podcast today. And for those who are interested in learning more, they can go to the Ledger Enterprise website or to Luga Nodes. And we're here for any questions that they might have afterwards. So thank you so much.
Thank you
for having us.